This is Christopher Werth. I'm in Johannesburg just before the World Cup kicks off, and one of the venues, Ellis Park Stadium, is just down the road from where I'm staying. Soon, tens of thousands of soccer fans will be descending on this city and many others across the country. It's been a while since South Africa has received this much international attention. In 1994, the world was transfixed when Nelson Mandela was elected president and the old apartheid regime crumbled. At that time, one of the key platforms of the new ANC government was fixing the debilitating housing problem. The old system had prevented black South Africans from things like owning property and living in cities. And as a result, by the mid-1990s, the new government estimated that 1.5 million families were trapped in substandard living conditions. So it embarked on an ambitious program to build houses for practically everyone living below the poverty line. But that hasn't been easy. Many whites fled to outlying areas, leaving neglected properties behind, and there's been little money to invest. So despite building 2.3 million housing units, roughly a quarter of the population still lacks adequate housing. Now, there's probably no other place where that ongoing housing crisis has come to a head quite like Johannesburg. This is South Africa's largest city, a sprawl of some 3.2 million people. And to get a sense of the challenges the city faces, I've come to Berea, one of Johannesburg's inner city neighborhoods, which, along with nearby Hillbrow, Yeoville, and Bertram's, has become synonymous in a lot of people's minds with crime over the past couple of decades. And reporting here can at times be difficult. There are occasional blackouts, which means that when you should be typing up your notes or emailing your editor, all you can do is sit in the dark and listen to the street life. During apartheid, Berea was a whites-only area. It was a fairly well-to-do one at that. It can be quite jarring to get this sense of what daily life was like under apartheid. Now, since then, the neighborhood has witnessed a phenomenal demographic shift. After the laws were lifted that restricted where black South Africans could live, many of the white building owners here abandoned these properties. They either moved to the suburbs or left the country entirely. And often, the absentee owners continued collecting the rent, but didn't pay the bills for things like water and electricity, which the city then eventually shut off. And when that happens, living conditions can get very bad very quickly. And this is the story for many of the city's so-called bad buildings, which are typically stripped of any services and at the same time packed with people sharing tiny apartments with nothing but a thin sheet to divide a single room where several families might be living. But for thousands of people in Johannesburg, these are the kinds of places they call home. One researcher told me that in neighborhoods like these, someone can rent a side of a bed for about $25 a month. It might sound miserable, but with unemployment at about 27%, many are reduced to finding accommodation however they can get it. The building in this photo is just a few blocks from where I'm staying. It has 31 studio apartments, and in each one there might be 3 to 10 people living inside. And the city shut off the water and electricity, so the residents truck water up by bucket from the building next door. Inside, a mountain of garbage has piled up in the stairwell, and the hallways are dark and damp. In fact, the odor is so strong it makes you choke when you first walk in. And the women here told me that the rats bite their children because there's no other food around. It's shocking to see how many children live here. People here say the police harass them a few times a week and accuse them of loitering. They say they come in and kick their doors in and sometimes throw their belongings out onto the street. And there's been a lot of pressure to regenerate these parts of the city, not only for the World Cup, but to make Johannesburg a world-class city that can compete with the likes of London or New York. But since 2008, it's become much harder to evict people like these. And that's because just down the street, there's another building called San Jose, where hundreds of people were living before the city issued an eviction order. The residents took their case all the way to South Africa's Constitutional Court. The court actually upheld the eviction, but it also said that the city had to provide alternative accommodation, which makes evictions much more expensive for the city to carry out. The head of Johannesburg's development agency says the ruling could bankrupt the city, and since it was passed down from the court, it's been much more difficult for it to draw investors to the area. But that doesn't stop the flow of people into inner-city Johannesburg. Over the past decade, immigrants from all over the continent have moved in, looking for jobs and the prospect of a better future. Some of them find success, and some of them don't.